Good morning. And actually, it is morning. We're re-recording this on Sunday morning, so it's a little delayed. I apologize for that. There was a misstep that I want to make a correction on, so you won't know about the correction because I'm not going to say it again. But I made a mistake, which is the reason for the delay. Growing up, we all have plans. We all have dreams. We all have those things in our lives that we say, "This is who I'm going to be, and where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do, and what I'm going to be about." And this and that. The first thing I can ever remember wanting to be was a Harlem Globetrotter. I love the Globetrotters. Curly Neal and the boys. That didn't happen. A, I don't have the skills. B, I'm short compared to a Globetrotter. Not going to be able to dunk the ball. I can't pass the ball like them. I can't spin a ball on my finger. That's not going to happen. I had the uniform. I looked good. Wasn't going to happen. Also dreamed one day of being Michael Jackson's backup dancer. True story. I had the sequin glove. I had the red leather jacket. I would have killed it on the set of Thriller. I mean, killed it. Other than the fact that I have no rhythm. I can't even clap on beat. And I dreamed of, more seriously, going to SIU, getting a teaching degree, teaching history and coaching basketball. That was the plan. That was the goal. That was what I was set to do. Come back to Woodlawn and coach. In fact, in our yearbook, our senior year, I was voted most likely to stay in Woodlawn. Because that's what I was about. Woodlawn Cardinals. Best team in Jefferson County. To this day, I still believe that. I was also voted class flirt. Some things don't change. I don't live in Woodlawn. I'm not coaching basketball. Go to Bible college. I was off the plan. And then I go to Heron, First Christian Church of Heron, where I served as youth minister for 11 years. And honestly, my plan was to stay there until I was no longer relevant as a youth minister. Each youth minister has that point in their life where they've reached that stage where the kids no longer relate to them. I probably would have never reached that stage. I probably would have gone throughout my life and been a youth minister, I think, because I'm always going to be cool. I'm a hip dude. But then out of nowhere, I get called to Plainville Christian Church, in the middle of nowhere, where we know nobody. And Rach and I pick up and move here. I'd like to say that I'll be here the rest of my life, but I don't know. I don't know what's next. You see, that's the thing is, each step along the way, when I got rid of my plans, when I put my thoughts, my actions on the back burner and trusted in God to lead me where He wanted me to be and be who He wanted me to be, things started coming together. Things changed. Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. It says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. For those who were called according to His purpose. For those whom He foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, in order that He might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom He predestined, He also called. And those He called, He also justified. And those whom He justified, He also glorified." See, God has called each and every one of us to a specific role, a specific task. Now, it may be for a season. It may be for a long term. It may be for a life. But He's called each and every one of us. It's whether or not we choose to answer that. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32. We've been on that passage and that chapter for forever. That last of the quick hitters. Barak and Gideon and Samson and David, and then he ends it with, and Samuel and the prophets. Now, we could spend an eternity talking about the prophets in the Bible. There are hundreds of men and women who are prophets. But there are two in particular that I want to focus on. One is mentioned by name there in Hebrews chapter 11 in Samuel. The other is a man named Isaiah. We'll get to those two in a minute. We've already talked about Samuel in a roundabout way. And on Mother's Day, we talked about Hannah and how she stood at the temple and prayed to God for a child, and she wept and wept and wept. And the prophet, priest Eli, he comes and he tells her, you shouldn't be drunk. And she says, "No, I'm not drunk. I'm consumed because I don't have a child." And she makes a vow to God before Eli the priest that if he were to bless her with a child, she would dedicate him to the service of the Lord. And she did. She had a boy named Samuel. And when he was old enough, he went to the temple and lived with Eli. And in 1 Samuel chapter 3, it tells us that at night, the Spirit of the Lord spoke to Samuel, but Samuel didn't know it was God. And the Lord spoke to him and said his name, Samuel, Samuel. And time again, he would go into Eli's room and say, "Here I am. You called me." And Eli would keep telling him, "No, I didn't. Go back to bed." And after some time of hearing this over and over, the same thing, Samuel would hear the voice. He would go and say, "Here I am." Finally, Eli realizes what's going on, and he says, "Hey, when you hear the voice, respond. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." In Isaiah chapter 6, the Spirit of the Lord speaks, and God comes down and he talks and he says, "Who's going to lead my people? Who's going to be my spokesperson? Who's going to be my guide for the nation of Israel? Who's going to tell them my decrees, my words?" It tells us in Isaiah chapter 6 that the young boy Isaiah speaks up and says, "Here I am, Lord. Send me." Two different prophets, two different men of God, two different callings, but the same response. And we could say that about all the prophets in the Old Testament, and the major prophets and the minor prophets, Hosea and Joel and Amos and Obadiah and Jonah and Micah and Nahum and Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai and Zechariah and Malachi, Isaiah, Samuel, they all did the same thing. They answered the call. Remember that passage we read in Romans chapter 8, verse 28? God has a calling for each and every one of us in our lives. Follow through with it. Have the same convictions that those men and women had, and the words that Eli heard from Samuel. "Here I am." And then what Samuel told the Lord, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Or have the faith and the courage to stand up like Isaiah and say, "Here I am, Lord, send me." But we say, "But I've accepted Christ in my life, and I've done this, I've done that, and I've been baptized, and I'm a Christian." But what are you doing with your life? You've answered the call of being chosen. Isaiah and Samuel could have answered the call, but it's what they did after that mattered. We say, "Well, I got baptized and I'm an accepted believer," but what have you done after that? Because unless you do something after that, you just took a bath with no soap, sometimes no chlorine. I've been to some baptisms in the middle of a pond where we had to shoo out cows. That is not clean. You took a bath in dirty water. Unless there's a life lived afterwards. Isaiah said, "Here I am, send me," and he went. Samuel said, "Here I am, Lord, speak, for your servant is listening." And he listened, and he did. But we say, "But I don't hear my name being called out like Samuel did. I don't hear the voice of God like Isaiah did. I don't see the burning bush like Moses saw. I don't hear the same things that are happening in the Old Testament." That doesn't happen. It's because you're not listening. Time and time again, we as Christians see and hear in this book what we're supposed to do and who we're supposed to be. In Matthew chapter 22, Jesus is confronted by a teacher of the law, and he asks him, "What's the greatest commandment?" He said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength." And the second is just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Another passage right along in there, Jesus is challenged by the teachers of the law of who their neighbor is. And he gives them the parable of the Good Samaritan. Then you go over to Matthew chapter 25, and Jesus goes into parables, and he talks about, the sheep and the goats. He separates sheep to one side and the goats to the other, referencing heaven and hell. And God will separate them out, and he'll look at the sheep and he'll say, enter in, because this is your eternity in heaven. The kingdom awaits you. And he said, because you took care of all the people around you. You took care of my needs when I needed it. And he explains to him throughout this passage of Matthew chapter 25 that when we take care of the sick, the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, those in prison, when we meet those people's needs, we're really taking care of the Lord. But then he separates the goats and he tells them that he's casting them off, that they have eternal damnation because he didn't have them take care of the needs of the other people. He didn't see them sharing the love that they proclaim to have. Then Matthew chapter 28, as Jesus is getting ready to ascend into heaven, he tells his disciples, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them the things that I have commanded you. And lo, I will be with you always until the very end of the age. So you want to tell me that we as Christians, once we've accepted Christ in our lives, we don't have a calling? That he's not speaking to us? That is just four passages right there that are clear-cut what we need to be doing with our lives. Calling. Matthew 5:17, he tells us to let your light shine amongst men so they may see your good deeds and give praise to your Father who's in heaven. Live your life out on this earth, praising God's name, but sharing the love of Christ with everyone you come in contact with. Matthew 22, he sums it up very simply. You love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. You take care of people. You meet their needs. You show them the love of Christ. It's not rocket science. It's called being a Christian. But too many of us like to sit on our butts and not get out and actually do the job of a Christian. We want to be fed. We want people to cater our needs. But what God tells us is simple. Do it. Get out and be who you're supposed to be. And say what you're supposed to say. And live the way you're supposed to live. That's your job. In John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35, it's one of my favorite passages in the scriptures. It's Jesus talking, and he tells us, I give you a new command. Love one another as I have loved you. You should love one another. And he ends that in verse 35 by simply saying, this is how they will know that you are my disciples, that you will love one another. 4 times he tells us right there. We're to love one another. That's our job. That's our goal. That's our purpose. That's how they'll know that we are his disciples, if we love one another. But the kicker is this. What does he say right there in verse 34? New command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. Last time I checked, he died on a cross because he loved me. I am a punk. I am a jerk. I am arrogant. I am proud. I am rude. I get agitated easily with people. I am a sinner. But when he died on the cross, he looked down and said, I love that punk. I love that jerk. I love that sinner. My job as a Christian, when I accept Him into my life, when I proclaim the name of Christ and I say, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God," my job is to shine the same light that He shined on me when He died for me to everyone I come in contact with. That is our calling. When we follow through with that, then we truly are His children. So what's your job? What are you supposed to do? Who are you supposed to be? A child of God. Somebody who shows His love. I hope you have a great week.